think that worked. Nice. So, what I wanted to do on today's Tao Tuesdays was talk about yin and yang energy, um, which is the feminine and the masculine. I still have my blanket here from doing breath work just a little bit ago. And something that I really noticed as a female who has been living in survival mode for most of my life is that it is really fucking hard to get out of masculine energy. Um, or not really, it's hard. It's like, I feel like getting out of masculine energy as someone who has lived in survival mentality for so long is a habit that you have to break. I notice it all the time in just like little things, but how you do one thing is how you do all things, right? Is that the saying? I don't really believe that, um, but I do in some cases, I guess. Not everything is all so fucking black and white, right? But what I have noticed is that it's really fucking hard for me to let my partner take care of me. Like, I've gotten really good at letting him make me food and like do the like he's wonderful. He's so fucking wonderful. But I mean in like ways that make it seem like I can't take care of myself. Like when he holds door, like it's so weird. I'm so used to being efficient that whenever he's helpful and to me his helpfulness like makes something not as efficient, I get annoyed. And I'm like, for instance, right? I get annoyed when my partner opens doors for me, which is fucking ridiculous. Also, slow the fuck down, Katie. You don't have to get everywhere so fucking quick. Everything doesn't have to be like, to what is being more efficient by not letting someone open a door for me, right? Like, but it's just like this thing embedded in me that's like, I can get through here quicker. There's time. We're still wasting time, like what are we, I don't know what's being wasted, but it's like this part of me that just like can't like sit and wait for him to open the door for me. And I notice a lot of these things too in really any way he tries to help me. I notice this in the ways that he tries to help me by doing masculine things that I'm really good at, right? Like if I got a flat tire, I would never let him change it. Or if there was something to like build in the house or like something to hang in the house, anything that has to do with like handyman work, I won't let him do it. I've gotten a little bit better. There are some things now that I'm just like, oh, this is nicer. Like I'll let him carry the groceries. Oh, it's so nice of me. I let him carry the groceries. Like the shit I hate doing. Like I'll let him get something on a higher shelf. And there's this part of me that is like, anytime I let him do something for me that allows me to be in my feminine energy, which, okay, when I'm saying feminine and masculine energy, I don't mean a man's job and a woman's job. Typically, yes, like we think of masculine and feminine energy in these ways. But really, when it comes down to it, is like masculine is active, feminine is receiving. Um, that's like the like most basic way I guess I can explain it, right? So we've been raised in this society that has taught us that being in feminine energy means weakness because being a woman is weak, which has also played a really detrimental role on our men, right? Like men are not able to heal as well, I feel, as women, or like get into a healing space as easy as women are because they have not been allowed to effectively be in their feminine energy to receive things like that. But I think, well, I mean, we can talk about that now, I guess. But I didn't really feel like it because I've noticed just this. Today I'm talking about me because I've noticed that that's what I'm leaning into, right? Like, I'm wondering out there how many women are having a hard time leaning into their feminine energy, right? I would be curious as to, like, I'm wondering the women who are healing, like, how often do you notice yourself almost triggered by people putting you in a space of feminine energy? Or like, it's weird, I don't like to say the word force because, like, it sounds strange to think about it that way, right? Like, when my partner forces me to let him open the door for me, like, that's not how it works. I'm just like, why didn't you walk through the door? Why didn't you just walk through the door? Why are you on my side of the car? Just get in the fucking car. Like, now I'm like, shit, let's move a little bit slower. Let's accept this stuff that's coming to us, right? Because if I want to accept bigger things in my life, if I want to accept more amounts of money, if I want to accept more abundance into my life, well, I'm not going to be able to accept that kind of abundance with an attitude of like, stop helping me. It's how I am a lot. And it makes me feel really bad when I acknowledge it now. Like, I didn't tell my partner this. I highly doubt he'll watch this unless I tell him that I talked about him on this. But Langdon, when you do see this, if you see this, I did not tell you that the other day when we were at the beach, I had been filming our dog because it's our dog's birthday. And I did one of those things where I'm like taping and then I accidentally hit start as I was putting the phone down. And I actually put the phone inside the beach bag while we had just gotten to the park. Charlie's like drinking all of this sea water. And I'm like, oh no, this is going to be terrible, which it didn't end up being terrible, but he's still alive. So that's great. Just projectile vomited for like 24 hours. Anyways, the camera was pointing up at me and I found it later. And it's literally me yelling at Langdon. Not yelling, but just like very like crass, very like annoyed tone. And like, this is a conversation that he and I have had where he's like, the way you speak to me is just like, it's mean, And I always thought I was just being direct. And I would ask him, I'd be like, tell me when you're talking about, like, tell me what you're talking about. Tell me when it happens. When do I talk to you like this? Like, explain it to me. I need to understand because otherwise it doesn't exist or something like that. Right. And which honestly is me just trying to understand, especially from someone who is autistic. Like, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I'm not trying to belittle you or trying to be like, your feelings don't exist. I'm trying to see them from the other person's side so that I can figure out how to adjust the way I behave, right? So I need like specific examples so that I can be better at recognizing how I come across sometimes, because it's hard for me. I don't recognize it while it's happening. And then I saw that video and I was like, oh my God, like, it's not helpful. It's not nice. And I was like, I recognize that definitely people have to figure out how to regulate their own nervous systems, right? But I did notice that it also was a tone of voice that I remember very clearly from my childhood. And I would never want anyone to speak to me the way that I felt I was spoken to by my siblings and my parents ever in my life. Even the way that I speak, like, I recognize it is a way that my family speaks to each other. And it is just, it's not kind. It's very irritated, very annoyed, very just like triggered all the fucking time. And that triggering voice and triggered voice and a way of speaking is how I speak when I am triggered in feminine energy or feeling like I'm forced into feminine energy, which is sad, you know, like as women, we need help. We need women in the home with kids want more help from their husbands, but don't know how to accept it because we know better and we know how to do everything better than men do, right? But then at the same time, we want these men to learn how to do things, but we don't even give them the opportunity to learn how to do them or to take us out of the space of being the provider of every single fucking thing in the world. And it's just this dichotomy that I'm noticing. Even at, like, I don't have a child, but I have a dog. My partner sucks at walking my dog and I get pissed off about it all the time. And so I take on the role of being like, I have to walk him. I have to walk him. And just like, like, these are conversations that we should be having. All of us should be having, you know, and not to say that anyone is doing wrong. Like, we were raised in a society that created the monsters we are. So it is our job now as adults who recognize that what is happening to be willing to have these hard conversations, right? Hard conversations do not mean that we have to fight. Hard conversations do not mean that things have to end in divisiveness, right? I think a lot of times when we have arguments or we fight as human beings, we think that someone has to be wrong and someone has to be right, where that's not true. Like, both things, both experiences can exist at the same time and both can be truth. My experience and my partner's experience are completely different, but that doesn't make either of them less valid. And I think that being able to recognize the validity of everyone's experience would give allowance for a lot of us to live in our yin and our yang energy equally if we allowed ourselves to show up in the safety of that, you know? And I don't know. I just think that today's Tao Tuesdays was meant for balancing, talking about what that balance means, talking about how our men might need more patience bestowed upon them as they figure out what healing is, what community is, what living a different way looks like. And I think that we as women need to have or get to have more patience with ourselves in trying to establish safety in our femininity, you know, because this world can be a scary place for being very feminine. People don't want to take us seriously in board meetings. There is literally research that shows that people will not take female voices as seriously as masculine voices. This world has been set up in a way where being a woman is not safe. And again, femininity, masculinity, yin and yang energy are not coordinated exactly with being the gender female or male, which is something that we really need to get away from. But we also have to recognize in the moment that we're learning these things that this is how most people associate feminine and masculine energy. We can't just immediately be like, they don't exist like that. Like, we have to understand that there's a reason why people are associating them together. And also what the conversations are around that. Like, why do we associate these things so closely together besides what their names are? Like, why we have to deconstruct what it is that we know about these things before we reprogram ourselves to understand what they truly mean. Because if we just immediately just tell people feminine and masculine is not male and female and blah, 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 like, that doesn't allow a person to deconstruct what their meaning of femininity is. And so immediately they're just going to be fucking against it. Like, no man is going to hear that and be like, let me get into my feminine, like, no straight man is. Immediately. And honestly, like, I'll be the first to say, like, these were the hardest conversations me and my partner ever had. The hardest conversations we have ever had to have, the biggest blowout fights that we've ever had to have been a lot to do with what being a woman is like, what being feminine is like, what is allowed in the world being a woman, and being like, what is the difference between the male experience and the female experience. And so I'm just letting you know that they're hard conversations, but there are ways to have them. And it gets easier the more that you have these conversations. Because now it's just like any other thing we'll talk about is the difference between feminine and masculine. And like, it's very interesting coaching men compared to women, because I can tell that I can sense that different, like, specifically one thing that we were talking about last night is like the intuition, right? Receptivity of intuition. I think it's much, much harder from what I have experienced in coaching and noticing and having conversations with both men and women, is that it can be very difficult for men to get in touch with their intuition because it is hard for them to be in tune with their feminine energy, which makes it more difficult for them to receive. And so it's a muscle. And this is what I had to explain to my partner last night is like, we did a technique on him where you're calling out to your intuition, right? Or speaking to the subconscious mind immediately. And I could sense that it was more difficult for him than other clients that I have worked for. And so it is very much like a muscle that needs to, or gets to, be worked out. And that the more that you work out that muscle, the more you work with your intuition, the more you'll be able to recognize that you can understand that, hear that, receive it, accept it, whatever that is. And so I think in those moments for men, I mean, just think about it, right? Like, as women who have been living in survival mode for so long, like, it is so hard for us to lean into our feminine energy, right? We're not even men. But we have been working so hard and fiercely in the masculine identity for so long that it's really fucking hard to lean into that femininity. And we are not even men. So there is that part. But also it's exhausting, right? Like, it's not our job as women to heal men. But I will also say that for the men out there that are working on this, that are working on themselves, shout out to my partner, because I fucking love you. He works on himself all the fucking time. And he's an incredible partner. The conversations we are able to have because he works on himself really mean a lot to me. And so for the men out there who are working on themselves, who are learning how to lean into their feminine energy and not use it as a way to manipulate the other sex, I'm very fucking proud of you. And I'm grateful that you exist on this earth, because we need more men like that are willing to lean into both sides of their yin and yang energy, just like we as women are now in a time where we get to lean more into our feminine. It's not always easy, but I'm fucking working on this. It's fucking hard as shit for me, right? So, I don't know. For anyone who watches this, I'd be curious as to what anyone's ideas are for how we can lean more into our feminine energy. Especially, you know what I really like is that anyone who's watching this, who's like coming from a state of like, I'm not in a relationship, I don't have like a masculine side to lean on, or like I am deeply in survival mode right now. Like, I'm very curious what thoughts anybody has as to ways that people can lean more into their feminine energy while still being in survival mode. Like, how can we help people feel safe to receive while still in survival mode? That is a fucking brain buster. And I'm going to leave it there. Please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear everybody's ideas about ways in which we can receive more while still being in survival mentality. All right. Love you all. Have a wonderful day. And I will see you tomorrow for Why Woo Works Wednesdays. Woo. See you there too.